Okay, hi there. This assignment is intended for the advanced art class. Um, we're going to do a little warm-up activity before you do your watercolor, your main watercolor painting. And it's going to involve this. You should have this with you. Um, this is my master copy to copy from. That's why there's two. You will have one of them. And you're going to take your watercolor paper. That's half of a sheet of watercolor paper. And you're going to trace it. Just go to your window. I've cheated and I've done that already, so trace that kind of nicely. What I did when I traced it, I just kind of made a little mark at each corner and then at these corners as well, and I used a ruler to kind of make my straight lines. You don't have to do that. It's not that big of a deal, but if you want to, that's totally fine. Now, ideally, we tape the paper down to a piece of cardboard or something. But that's why we're going to work a little smaller, and that's why we're going to have this extra space here that I've designed in. And you want to kind of center this thing on your piece of paper. So we're going to work without a piece of cardboard, and it's called stretching your paper, technically. But it should be just fine. This paper is pretty good thickness, so it'll work out just fine. Excuse me. Now I'm going to put this aside for a second, and we're going to just do these two first right here. And in class, we will have labeled these. This is going to be the flat wash, and this is going to be the faded wash. So hang in there a second. But what we do first is we have to get our colors ready. So I have my water just off screen here. It's kind of dirty water. I should probably go clean that. I will before I do the second part. But again, to make your colors, have your paper towel. This one's dried out. I've used it before, but it dried out. And what I did before I started the video, I brushed a couple of drops of water into my blue and my green. You can do any color you want. I would keep it more blues and greens and purples and oranges and reds. Let's stay away from neutral colors for now. Don't use brown. Please don't use black for this. And don't use yellow. You can't see the yellow very much. And you can see I've used this tray before. And really, guys, remember, all you have to do to clean it up is just get a little water, mix it around, and take a paper towel, and it cleans up real easily, just fine. Okay, I'm going to use some blue to begin with. It doesn't matter which one. And what you do is you make a pretty good puddle of a relatively dark blue. Okay, so that's not a puddle yet. A puddle would be something that would, if you tipped it, would probably try to run. So I'm going to add a little more water. Just kind of get a little more water in there, make it a little more of a puddle, maybe a little more paint. I don't really want to see through this paint very much. It should, for our purposes right now, it should be kind of dark. You shouldn't see through it very well, but again, if you tipped it very much, it would start to collect and it's almost going to kind of drip. That's the puddle we're looking for. So I'm going to add a little more water, a little more paint. Okay, so that's a pretty dark puddle. It's a good idea to have a piece of scratch paper by your side, even if it's cheap computer paper, and you can tell real quickly kind of how dark it is. This isn't good paper. It'll kind of go bad in a second there. But I'm going to make it just a shade darker. But again, for the size of the area we're working on, that's a plenty big puddle, and that's dark enough. Okay? All right, so here we go. I'm going to let this be right off screen so you can see my work a little better. All right, what we're going to do, and I'll explain it a little bit first. We're going to kind of, we're going to hold the board, hold the paper so it tips up a little bit. So there's flat and there's tipped up a little bit. Okay, so when I put paint down, it's going to want to fall to the bottom of where I just painted. Now the idea is to never run out of paint. Always have kind of a good load of load of water and paint in your brush. And all you're going to do is, as carefully as you can, just kind of try to stay in your lines, and you're going to let the next stroke touch the last one. Now look how that bead of paint is falling to the bottom. You can see where it's dark there. As long as that big, heavy, dark bead is there, I can pick it up and keep moving down. I'm going to go get more paint. And you just kind of take your time a little bit, let gravity pull that paint down to the bottom. Okay, and then there's a chance you might see little bits of streaks back there, but we're trying. The idea here is to try to make this whole area very much the same color. That's why you have to always work from the same color in your palette. So kind of take your time. If it's a little lumpity-bumpity over there, it's no big deal. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to try to get all of that looking very much the exact same. Now that's a nice heavy bead still. So I can just kind of leave it there for a moment. I don't have to rush this because it'll just kind of pick up and keep coming down. Now at the bottom, this is a little tricky part. Now that big heavy bead we want to soak up. So I have my paper towel just off screen here, and I'll let you see it here. I'm going to wipe off my paint. So I just kind of wiped it off. You can see it down there. And I'm just going to try to pick up. Like, remember that idea of a thirsty brush? That's what a thirsty brush is. It's a paintbrush that has the tiniest bit of moisture left in it. And I'm just going to touch the bottom and let gravity kind of take over. See, it's kind of making it go down to the bottom. I have to take my time, let gravity, let the watercolor do its work. The only place that really can be a little irregular is down here where you did this work. So I'm just barely touching it, trying to get it. Now, do not go back up and paint. You will ruin it. Okay, you need to just leave it, completely leave it. And I'm also going to leave it tipped up a little bit until it really settles down into the paper. Because if you lay it flat, this paint down here might start to creep back into the painting there. And for the most part, I have one little light area for some reason right there. I don't know why that's there, but that's no big deal. You can kind of see that. Generally, the whole thing is pretty darn flat. And that's the goal for this flat wash. Okay, I'm going to stop the video and get this dry and then show you the next part. All right, we're back. This is really bone dry. We're going to just leave it alone. We don't want it to run. I took a blow dryer to it for a minute, but that's nice and dry. We're done with that. Next, we're going to go to the faded wash, and I have labeled what we're going to be doing, just as a reminder, because you will be labeling this as well when you do yours. Now, I'm going to use green this time, but this time I made a thicker, kind of more opaque green, and you don't need very much paint for this one. And what I did, again, I had a little water in here. I just pulled it out here, just a tiny bit of water, and you can see when I use my scratch paper, it's definitely kind of a thicker green, darker. Okay, and that's what you want. I could make this just about as dark as I wanted to for this one, for this faded wash. And I'm going to clean my brush out. And what you need to do is clean out your water. I have brand new, fresh, clean water here off to the side. And it's a wet on wet. This one is wet on dry. You put wet paint on dry paper. Wet on wet is what we're going to do here. And we'll kind of do a combination of both throughout this little exercise. So I'm going to wipe off my brush, get some very clean water. And we're going to still have the paper in our hand so we can tip it and move it around. I'm going to be doing a lot of that in just a moment. So we use very clean water. And when you apply water to watercolor paper, you have to give it a moment or two or three to soak in. Watercolor paper is like a sponge. It's a big, really flat sponge. It's intended to be able to soak up water. Soak up water. Now, if you notice, I have a really light touch, and I'm having to see when I move the paper, so you can see the glare. That's what you can see to see where you might have missed a spot or where something is drying out too much. And you might even see that water kind of moving, which is kind of okay. You don't want so much water that it comes down here and it's going to kind of fall off. And what I like to do, see it's drying out right there, so I'm going to get a little bit of water, add a little more. I like to let that water soak in. so it kind of saturates the paper. And I'm going to add another light, quick coat of water. I can see it's kind of drying at the edges. Now again, it's important to wait a minute. Makes it no fun to watch a video, to watch water dry, I know. But it's important to wait a minute and make sure it's all kind of evenly coated. Now, I'm only going to put a few strokes of color up here, and the rest is done by tipping the paper. So you'll see how that goes here. So this nice dark green. Remember, anytime you add color to, look at it bleed already. Anytime you add color, you're only going to put some color up there. That's it. The water on the paper is going to make that lighter. Now you can kind of see the little splotches right now, but watch how I tip the paper. See, I'm going to let it tip. See, it's starting to run down, but we don't want it to go all the way down. I can let it kind of go down. See, it's moving kind of slowly. I see I kind of miss the edge. See, it's kind of not going all the way to the edge, so I'm just going to barely touch a little bit of water right there. So now I'm going to bring it back up. I'm tipping it the other way. Now this fading blend is not going to be a perfectly smooth blend like you would get on a computer. It's going to be slightly irregular. You have to, it's like watching a snail crawl on the ground. You have to just let the water, see, I'm tipping it. Now I'm going to go back down. I need to bring some over here. See, it's even like splitting into the little texture of the paper. Just hang in there with this. You don't want the color to go all the way down to the bottom because you want it to kind of fade away. This is a great way to control if you're going to do a sky that goes light to dark, or the first coat of like the water, the undercoat of the water before you put the little wavy lines on it. See, it's just kind of fading away irregularly there. Could be if you had some rocks or a distant mountain, do this first. Now, I'm going to try some. It's still wet. I can only do this, what I'm going to do, if it's still wet. I'm going to take a little drop of water and just kind of go drop, 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 drop. Now, if I did that when it's still dry, it would leave those little water stains. But since there was water on there already, now I can move this around. I saw some dark spots up there. That didn't help a lot. I'll do it again. Just drop, 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 drop. I'm going to see if I can get that to, actually I'm going to, since it's still wet, I can do this. I'm going to add a little more color to try to get it darker up there. Now, what you don't do is start to paint with your brush all over the place. That's never going to work if you're trying to get kind of a gradual blend. And I know this is, now again, I could only have done that. Whoops, I'm off screen, sorry. So I'm keeping it tipped this way most of the time because I want the darker part to come down to the top. Now it's starting to move a little more regularly without splotches. So sorry about moving this thing around a lot, but this is what you do. You have to watch it carefully. So there's kind of an edge leading. That's okay, because I'm going to tip it back the other way and let it collect more at the top. This is the kind of time you need to take, and be careful. And then, now this is okay. That looks pretty good. See, it's kind of fading. There's a green little scoop right there. That's no big deal. Now what you do is if it's kind of settled where you like it, but it's still moving a little bit, what I do is I tip the paper a little bit, and I just kind of keep rotating it like I'm taking a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn. That kind of keeps it where it is, but it'll kind of keep moving back and forth until it settles into the paper. If I just sit it here, it's going to fall down into any little valleys that happen to make it happen because of the paper warping a little bit, which it will do. So I'm just going to keep spinning it, and it kind of just rotates right where it likes to be. Again, I did very little brushwork. It was all letting the water control where it fades, and you watching it carefully and keeping it away from this end, but getting a nice little fade here. Now, again, you cannot go fix this after it dries. You will leave water stains. All right. See, it's still wet. You can see the glare coming around, right? I don't want to put this down, and I don't want to blow dry it until a lot of that shiny stuff has kind of muted down. So I'm going to stop the video here in a second. I'm going to keep moving it, I promise, until it really, the shine is really beginning to go away. That means the pigment is soaking into the paper, and it really won't move anymore. Then I'll blow dry it, and on the next video, we'll talk about these parts right over here. And then you'll see the result of this one on the next video. See you later.